of the dominant narrative. Please welcome Pope Ruiz.
You can tell how nervous I am about doing this one by looking at this.
You look confident in those boots.
That's why I had to wear the boots. So I'm taking on a new position at my school, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's been a very fascinating journey for me, and it's made me question my position in being able to do this. And so this is some of the thoughts in my head as I wrestle with some of the things going on. Out of tune. I was born in 1971 in East Texas, where the line between white and black, male and female, sinner and saved, was deeply etched in the dark, rich soil. Problem was, I was always on the wrong side of those lines. I was a girl who didn't want to give old men sugar on their cheek, or sit on their lap, or come up with polite conversation. I wanted to be outside riding horses with sweat dripping between my breasts, rather than in the kitchen cooking dinner and cleaning dishes. I argued with my Southern Baptist preacher after Sunday services, and I considered the black man we called Byrne, who worked on my grandparents' land, to be of equal status as my white World War II naval officer grandfather, even though I later realized Byrne always came in the back door. I guess I was slow to grasp the reality that there were separate churches for white and black, and that there was an invisible border we crossed when we took Byrne's wife a casserole when she was sick. But when my best friend from middle school, La Quinta's parents, moved her to an all-black school, and she invited me to her first school party, it hit me that we lived in two very different worlds. When my mom objected to my best friend in high school, who was from Ethiopia, because she scared her one night during a sleepover, because my mom said she could only see the whites of her eyes in the dark. And when my grandmother boycotted Christmas dinner because my black boyfriend from college made my grandmother claim that my mother had raised us all wrong, I started to feel the cacophony of my inner rhythm to that which I was surrounded by. I clearly remember my genuine confusion during one particular argument with my mom about why she never thought twice about me dating a white exchange student from Germany, but simply couldn't approve of Bobby, who spoke the same language and grew up on the other side of town, but was black. In college, I dated a black blues man twice my age who was illiterate and once homeless, a young Jewish heartthrob fresh off a kibbutz in Israel, and a philosophical Buddhist immigrant from Chile who introduced me to the writing of Carlos Fuentes. I once broke a beer bottle and walked defiantly across campus at Wesleyan University after a Take Back the Night march to prove to myself and to everyone else that I would no longer live my life cowed and afraid. After a scare with an ex-boyfriend who stalked me with a gun, I resolved to walk across campus after dark with a big stick that had a rusty nail sticking prominently out, instead of accepting what I considered a condescending white male friend's offer to walk me home. I eventually became so pissed about all the shit I suddenly realized I'd been politely putting up with as a woman, that I resolved to never date another man and happily resigned myself to a lesbian lifestyle despite my heterosexual tendencies. The closest I got for a while was falling for a trans man who really blurred the lines of any binary. I guess if I were coming of age today, I'd probably identify as pansexual, but I had no idea what that meant back then. Eventually, I spent 7 years of my adult life choosing celibacy as a part of a Hindu meditation group, rather than navigating the confusing gender power dynamics of relationship. I admit that I spent many years angry and confused. I devoted my time to speaking back to patriarchy and working at the Rape Crisis Center. The thought that I wasn't considered equal as a woman hit me hard. But the thought that people of color thought of me as an oppressor hit me even harder. I spent 30 years of my life feeling burdened and embarrassed by my inheritance from the European continent. I sobbed as I read Bury My Heart, A Wounded Knee. I devoured every Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, and Zora Neale Hurston novel I could put my hands on. I majored in anthropology and minored in women's studies in college and pined for a cultural heritage I could be proud of rather than humiliated by. As an adult, I married an undocumented immigrant from Oaxaca, Mexico, and did my time living in atonement for the sins of my ancestors. I was discriminated against by my own consulate in Ciudad Juarez, at restaurants and doctor's offices as soon as they saw who I walked in with. My husband was denied entry into this country after 9/11 despite his spotless track record and my life-threatening illness. Therefore, my children were mostly raised by an absent father as I fought for his papers for 6 years, writing letters to my representatives in the government, visiting their offices, and speaking in DC at a conference in favor of family reunification. I suffered mental and physical problems as well as insurmountable financial setbacks directly related to my living situation straddling the border. All the time feeling it was the least I could do to make up for the privileges I had undeservedly been born with. But after the birth of my daughter, something shifted deep inside me. I wanted to live a life my children could be proud of. As a believer in reincarnation, I wondered if there might be a reason I'd been brought back to this earth with my unique experiences of living with pale skin. So I vowed to make the most of my white privilege in the hope of creating a world that would be a better place than what I was born into, rather than squandering it in a black hole of white guilt. So here I stand today, trying to make sense of my place, teaching at an affluent, majority-white private Episcopal school. I practice shaman meditation and choose to worship God in a feminine form. I'm now a single mom to 2 bicultural children of Zapotec and European heritage. And I'm in love with a Comanche Apache man who is an engineer at Dell, a black belt in Shaolin Kung Fu, and a devout gun rights activist despite his pacifist Buddhist training. When we first started dating, I challenged him about this, but he put my liberal ass in check by saying, "Your people annihilated my people, leaving only 10% of us surviving your ancestors' arrival to our continent. And now you want to tell me not to protect myself?" We undoubtedly live in confusing times with no clear answers. Sometimes it feels as if we are all spiraling madly out of control. We're all so afraid that we yell as loud as possible and shift blame as if it were some childish game of hot potato. But I'm tired of all that. There's simply too much work to be done and too little time to do it in. So I want to ask all of us, no matter where we come from, to take up the challenge of living up to our full potential and ask what gifts we've been granted and what unique perspectives we can share that will help us all live a more compassionate, fulfilled, and courageous life.